On This Week in Sales, we're going to be looking at why you should challenge your sales target if it looks ugly for 2021. We're going to take a look at a study that shows 66% of sellers would rather clean their bathroom rather than update their CRM system, and how hub and spoke might be the future of selling from home, and much, much more. Hi everyone, my name is Will Barron, and I'm the host of, or one host of This Week in Sales. The other half of the show, Victor Antonio, joins me by the power of the internet. Victor, how is it going, sir?
Man, it is going good, Will. It's getting a little chilly here in Atlanta, Georgia, but other than that, it's pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm very good. Yeah, it's proper autumn now, to the point of me and my girlfriend are blowing leaves around the garden to try and tidy it up. That's when I know that winter's coming.
Why can't it just be autumn? Why does it have to be proper?
So in cities in the US, do you not use this terminology of you might have New York and then New York proper, which is like the actual inner city?
True. Is that how you say it? So you say proper, you're in the autumn.
Yeah, not. It's just a little bit mild, and there's a few leaves here. Now, if I'm pulling out the leaf blower, the shit has hit the fan, literally.
Got it. Or the leaves have hit the fan. There you go.
Good. Well, let's jump into this, Victor. So first up, a report from Forrester that says sales leaders should not commit to unrealistic numbers for 2021. I've got a few points here, and there's a few recommendations, but Victor, just on the top of this, and this is from a slideshow presentation that was hosted on LinkedIn Live. How wary should we be as salespeople when we get numbers given to us right now for the next following year? How much should we be battling these numbers and trying to get them to become more appropriate?
I mean, we're acting like this is something novel, right? that we're given unrealistic numbers every year. Of course, we're given unrealistic numbers. I think we're talking about because we don't know what the outcome of the pandemic might be, is what we're thinking about. But I think, I mean, it's always a challenge, man. When you've been in sales, I've been in sales. Every year, fourth quarter, the politicking begins, right? We start kind of like, well, I don't know if I can make this number next year. Well, I don't know if I can repeat it. So we start downplaying. Did you do that, by the way?
Of course I did.
Did you sandbag? We call it sandbagging. Yep. What do you call it?
Exactly the same. So if I knew I had a big deal coming in Q1, Q2, and just the time frames I'd usually be working at, it would be 3 to 6 months lead time on working on a deal, selling medical devices to the NHS here in the UK. I just wouldn't tell people about it. I wouldn't even tell my manager and tell him or her to keep it on the down low. I'd just not tell anyone.
Yeah, I mean, so this says sales leaders don't commit to unrealistic numbers for 2021. Okay, let's talk about that. Well, let's go through the bullet points. Let's see what they have to say.
Okay, so there's and this isn't just an opinion. This is analysis that has been done by Forrester, and they say, and very specifically, they say this sentence: the worst thing sales leaders can do is sign up for unrealistic numbers. Now, Forrester's Phil recommends 4 ways to set achievable numbers in 2021. So I need your help to decipher some of this. Okay. I think you have more experience in corporate jargon than what my chimp brain does here, Victor. So the first one, arm yourself with third-party economic and budget data to justify your predictions. That makes sense, right? Yeah. Look at some outside sources, and that help. Well, that gives you justification to be realistic about things, right?
Use some external market conditions that might be occurring in the market to kind of level the playing field before we spike any, that whole thing. Yeah, the jargon kicks in really quick.
Yeah, okay, so I'm being serious about this jargon. We'll see in a second. So point 2. We're too late for this one. The planning process should have started before the fourth quarter. So I guess what they're saying here is if you've not already started planning the budgets moving forward and trying to make them more realistic with the uncertain market conditions that we're living in right now, you've made a mistake. But this is the big one. This is the one that I need you to help me decipher.
Okay. All right.
Utilize a structured planning process with a goal of measurable priorities that can result in plans that empower and motivate sales reps.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things we used to do, I totally get that one, actually. What it was is that, I'll give you an example. In the telecom business, if you get a quota for, let's say, I'm just going to say $1 million because it's a simple number, right?
Sure.
$1 million for 1 year. And instead of doing the 25, 25, 25, 25 split per quarter, what we would do is we would look at where we thought the waves were coming in. And so sometimes we would start out, okay, in the first quarter, all you have to do is hit 20%. And then you ramp it up from there. Or you hit your 30% in the first quarter because you knew that where the big nut was going to be. And then you structure it. So based on the information you had, you knew how to structure these quotas. And so by moving these numbers around, you could actually set a very low percentage of quota for the first quarter, kind of keep the salesperson motivated in the game, right? And hoping that the second quarter they'll pick up steam, so forth and so on. So that's how I view that. That's how I would structure my planning process in terms of compensation. Now, in terms of our planning process with a goal of measurable priorities, I mean, come on, that's up to salespeople to figure that out. Today, given the way we're using technology, I would assume the implication here is let's use some of the data to really help salespeople structure how they should plan their year out. What accounts are priorities, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. That's what I think. It's a lot of babble, though.
Sure. Genuinely, I would not have come to that conclusion from that sentence of nonsense. So it's just one of the levels of value you're offering to the show, to me and to the audience here, Victor. And then the fourth point here is to engage stakeholders in planning and encourage cross-functional collaboration. Again, I'll see if I can decipher this one. Is what we're saying here that we need to be less siloed. We need to get management involved in the bigger deals. We need to get marketing involved in perhaps carpet bombing some love bombs over these accounts that we're going after. Is that what we're looking at here when we're engaging stakeholders and encouraging cross-functional collaboration?
Yes, and other functions would include like customer support, technical support, application engineering support. Let's all get on the same team. Let's all get on the same page. Let's really work together, share the information. If you hear something, you let me know. If I hear something, I'll let you know, all that. But the reality is that works at a certain level. But when the workload is heavy, people have to begin to prioritize. And so what I learned when I was in corporate America, and I had to work with cross-functional teams, is what I would do is I would take care of my cross-functional team. I knew who the stakeholders were within the company that were helping me put a proposal together. That was one department. Support was another department. Engineering was another department. I knew who my key players were. And you know what? Well, every time I traveled somewhere, I would come back with a bag of goodies, or I would take them out to lunch and I would treat them right. Every smart person knows that. Every smart salesperson should know that.
So, Victor, you're off somewhere and you're coming back and you want to keep someone in the good books. What's in a Victor bag of goodies?
Oh, I mean, it would be like bottles of wine. Sometimes it was like there's some local delicacies that you can, they're boxed up. Today it's easier because you can just go get it at the airport. But back then, it was harder to find local things at the airport. And so I would make sure that I would take one day or one evening to go shopping. I could pick up scarves. Whatever, if it was, for example, Argentina, known for leather and wine. Yep. So I would pick up leather gloves and maybe bring back some bottles of wine. And so I always got stopped by customs. So what are you doing? And I would just say, that's what I'm doing. They go, I get it. Go.
Well, I won't ask you what you brought back from your trips to Colombia and what happened at customs there. We'll save that for this week in sales after hours or something.
By the way, I have stories. I have stories.
Okay, so we'll get into actually sharing content internally and sharing ideas internally in a second with regards to work at home. But what have we got next up in the doc here, Victor?
Look at, so Gartner, one of my favorite websites to visit. I want to, this is not shameless promoting for Gartner, but it is shameless promoting for Gartner because I think they have some of the best studies and some of the most insightful perspectives. Whether you agree with them or not, it's a point of conversation, data point. So this is what Gartner is saying. By 2025, which is like 4 years away, maybe 5, right? Depending on how you look at numbers, 80% of B2B sales interactions between suppliers and buyers will occur in digital channels. That's huge. It continues. Gartner expects that by 2025, 80% of B2B sales interactions and 60% of buyers will occur in digital channels of B2B sales organization will transition from experience and intuition-based selling to data-driven selling. Now, merging their sales process, application data, and analytics into a single operational practice. What does that mean? Translating it is that we're starting to see this shift. Sales was always considered, let's just say 5-10 years ago, more of an art than a science.
Sure.
And what we're seeing is the full transition over more towards the 80-20 rule. Let's kind of use that, the Pareto principle, where it's now becoming 80% science and 20% intuition-based persuasion and influence. And I think that's an interesting shift because, again, many of the interactions are happening through the digital channels. So this whole thing about A, B, C, always be closing, done, right? Unless it's just some commodity product. But I think this is an interesting shift. 80% of B2B sales transactions will happen in digital channels.
So I don't think we've talked about this. I know we've talked about AI a bunch of times on my show and on here as well, on the Salesman Podcast and on This Week in Sales. But I've posed this to other people. Again, tell me if we've had this conversation, because we'll keep it short if we have in the past. Mm-hmm. But it seems like at some point, and they've alluded to it here, move from experience and intuition-based selling into data-driven emerging sales process applications, data analytics. It seems like at some point there's going to be an API for a large organization, and you plug in your data and your system will be able to say, hey, we're going to be able to do this, this, and this with the software, the tools, and the resources and the people that you have right now. And here's going to be the return on investment based on 10 other deals that we've done with this within your marketplace. So then it becomes a no-brainer to do these deals as long as you believe the data from the seller is somewhat accurate, and there's multiple ways to prove and disprove data on that front. So it'll take a lot. And let me ask you this then: is that a realistic thing that could potentially happen? In that a salesperson comes along and goes, "Hey, rather than me doing discovery, rather than me trying to get in with all these different people in the account, try and uncover all these stakeholders, we just plug this in and we say, hey." Using your plugins, using your data, using your CRM, we know that we can do 1, 2, 3 things for you. Does it make sense to get on a call and discuss it?
I think it's already happening. I think, it's, the early adopters have adopted this already. That's why you're seeing this consolidation with like Zoom, for example, and Gong, which we've talked about in the past, right? That's all about figuring out how do we interpret some of these conversations. But also think about all the multiple channels that are being. You got emails, you got your text, you got phones, you got everything coming in. It's mix it in the pot, and what's going to happen is that what we're considering complicated right now in our heads, because it's hard to fathom what you just said, right? Like, really, they can do that? But the thing is, they're doing it already. It just hasn't become commonplace yet, because only certain companies can do it who have their data structure act together right.
Let me rephrase the question slightly. So rather than the data that we're pushing out as salespeople, using Gong, using CRMs, we can pull it all together and we can make a unified message for the company, all that sort of things. Like what I'm talking about, what I'm describing, it's not very well. I'm obviously not putting this point across very well. But rather than maybe you start off with that unified message, but there's like a firewall on the enterprise side that we're trying to sell into, that has a gap in it, an API that we can plug into, and we're able then to see even it's anonymously within their system that we can potentially help them, rather than me ringing up Jane in IT and asking her a bunch of questions. Do you think we'll be at the point where a salesperson or engineer, whoever, plugs into an enterprise, sees they've got these 4 things going on, we can help them with 1, 2, and 3. And so then that's the sales pitch, that we've seen your internal data, we know all of this has happened, and it's done almost like a computer handshake anonymously, as opposed to 2 humans communicating what they want and what they need. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think if it is, let me break it up in 2 parts. One part is that if you want to do that handshake, the API handshake, to look into your systems, we have to have an agreement in place for me to do that, right? But also think about the reverse. So, by the way, that would be one of us agreeing for you to be able to look at my stuff and then, okay, go ahead and plug your API in, look at my data, and analyze what I have. I think they can do that today. You just got to do the official, let's agree, get the non-disclosure running. But when you look at what Chorus.ai or Gong does, is that they got customers, right, that use their product. Gong can then turn around and look at their data and say, hey, here's where you can find some more opportunities, because that's the real value of Gong. It's not just interpreting. Yeah. Gong turns around and goes to salesman.org and says, hey, you've been using our system with your 500 salespeople. Well, guess what we found? We looked at all your data. We've analyzed it. Here's what you need to do to win more deals. And that's being done today. I don't know if that helped clarify it.
It does. And again, we'll go into the weeds. We'll pull it back out in a second. But what's the legality of Gong? I guess it depends on the terms and conditions that you sign, that everyone just clicks accept when they sign up for these things. But what's the legality then, or the ethics perhaps, of Gong, who is serving multiple competitors in one market and then using a competitor's data to go to another organization who's competing against them and say, hey, brand A is doing this, maybe you should do this as well?
I don't think they would do that. That would be a conflict of interest. That would be stupid. You know what I mean? That would be really stupid to do that, because why would anybody sign up for Gong? So I assume that there's a confidentiality agreement. Our data is our data. You can analyze our data and you can tell us what we need to.
That makes sense.
But that's it. And so, and again, the data is anonymized, GDPR, all that good stuff. So, but yeah, if Gong would share IP with another competitor, why would they use it? So I'm almost sure there's like firewalls between all that.
Sure. Yep. Just a thought. I never really, because I know Amazon have been in trouble before for allowing a market of certain products to exist, an ecosystem to build, and then they just go and rip off one of the products and release the Amazon Basics version of it, which is probably created in the same exact factory, and then just using their platform to promote their own products, even if it's a sponsored post and seemingly they're paying for the privilege of advertising on their own platform. Clearly, the money just bounces around internally and doesn't actually exist. So I know they've been in trouble for manipulating these kind of single ownership markets in the past as well.
I think with the Amazon one, I guess I would distinguish that as that people put their products on their platform. They create a store, so to speak, right? Amazon sees that one's selling a lot and then creates their Amazon Basic version of that.
Yep.
One could argue that's full-blown laissez-faire capitalism online, because there's no agreement. We didn't sign an exclusive agreement. When I put my store online, I didn't sign an agreement with you say you can't copy it. So I think that's just capitalism.
Fair enough.
Albeit tilted towards Amazon's side, but yeah, capitalism.
Yeah, I think I'd want to be holding Amazon shares at this point versus a small widget maker who sells on Amazon, right?
That's correct. All right. Cool. What do we got next?
So next topic, how virtual teams can share better knowledge. We alluded and touched on this at the top of the show. So there's a bunch of points here, so we won't go through it all in one chunk. But despite many tech companies announcing that workers could remain remote going forward, leaders like JP Morgan's Jamie Dimon have called employees back to the office. And the concern here essentially is that whilst everyone is siloed, they can do their own job, they are finding that there is limited communication between each of these home-based silos. And so there's no innovation, there's less progression, there's less conversations, and if a mistake happens, it's easier for it to be swept under the carpet rather than picked up. So this organization, or JP Morgan and other organizations within this study, this is over at hbr.org, they are suggesting that this is very easily solved by managerial intervention, who are doing what they call guided meetings. So management booking meetings, employees are paired up, and each person has to basically reflect on their week, and then the other employee who they're paired up with, I guess, reflects on their reflection, and they go back and forth. It's almost like a mini counseling session, I guess, once a week. And that's they found in this study that is tying together this innovation that is being lost, this exchanging communication and conversations that's being lost by everyone working from home. And I thought this was relevant. I added this to the doc, Victor, because salespeople are somewhat not from necessarily from a bad perspective. They are somewhat known as perhaps being lone wolves. You've got a sales target to hit. It doesn't matter if Barry down the corridor hits his or not. It matters if you hit yours, if you want to take home your money for the year and you want to buy that Bentley or whatever stupid physical object you want to buy. So perhaps salespeople don't share enough within organizations. So this is perhaps one way to combat that. So what do you think about this, Victor? Does this work for salespeople? Is this something that salespeople should be doing? Or should we let salespeople just get on with their own job and not worry about over-communicating things and engaging with others within the team?
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, congratulations. I think this was a good find in terms of a study, some reporting. This is a good find because everybody's talking about the benefits of virtual teams, right?
Yeah.
And this one say, wait a minute. As you pointed out, there's little things like the creative piece, the collaboration piece, things that get lost in translation because of the digital media. We lose a lot. It's almost like a leaky bucket, right? You're losing some real good creative content. So I'm glad you brought this up because it does. You're bringing about a new question. Does virtual remote working work? We should now say, well, it depends. What are you trying to accomplish? What's the end goal? And who are we working with? In terms of salespeople, we're like, walking individual profit centers, right? So as I pointed out earlier, I'll take care of my stakeholders, which are the people who support my sales process. But I'm not worried about Will down the aisle, or in the on the other digital room about whether he's hitting his quote or not. Screw Will.
Well, thanks,
I'm
Victor.
worried about
I
me.
thought we were bros. I thought we were mates.
We are.
What is this?
No, it's a hypothetical. It's a hypothetical. And so I'm worried about me first, and I'll take care of my internal stakeholders, the people that support me. But in the case where, I mean, can you imagine, like, in the case of where a lot of collaboration is needed, creative work and collaboration is needed, it doesn't work, I think. It really doesn't work, because sometimes it's just you and I having a conversation in the office that triggers something that ripples into this. Let's do this. Let's whiteboard this real quick. Let's get in.
Yep.
So it doesn't work. So I get what they're saying. I agree. I think they know their business better than we do. And I think they're saying it's not working for us.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it. I'll put it in the show notes if I can track it down. But there's a phenomenon, and it's really well studied in married couples, right? There's almost a shared memory that forms between married couples. A married couple, one person will start a story, another person will finish it, and it basically reduces the load on the brain. And they've put people into functional MRI machines, and they've studied this, and they can see that the brain activity in the brain flicking between one person and another, and it almost allows you to pull at and get all this deep knowledge out of your brain, sit back for a second, recuperate, and then go back and forth. And I think it was every 5 to 10 seconds the brain activity would switch over between the two individuals. So I've never worked with anyone that I've been getting close to marry or married to. So there's perhaps a diminished level of this effect in the workplace. But things like this exist. As you described, Victor, of you say something, someone goes, "Oh, I never thought about it like that before," and you've just sparked this creativity. And I think it's important in sales. Of a lot of my best experiences in sales, and when I've taken leaps forward in my own ability to sell, they've come from someone saying something that they thought was just obvious that I hadn't considered before. Perhaps because they had the burden of knowledge, that they had more experience and more knowledge, and they just thought that was normal. Everyone knew it. And so I hear something and I go, "Oh, great, I'll try that." And then that's how I've taken big leaps forward. I've taken leaps forward from training specifically, but also just from random conversations with people who are just those few years ahead of me.
Yeah. That's happened to me many times. And you got me thinking about, we're all exuberant, well, not all, but some of us are exuberant about working from home, right? And we're saying to ourselves, we tell ourselves, we're getting as much done, if not more. That's what we're telling ourselves.
Yep.
But I'm wondering if we'll look, 5-10 years from now, we'll look back and say, this isolation effect of you being by yourself really didn't produce, the level of activity you should have produced. And maybe we're not being optimized. We think we are, but maybe we're not being optimized. So this is an interesting topic. I think it's an interesting topic. So I'm glad you brought it up, because I think it's very fascinating.
And there's a massive difference between productivity of I've made 50 more calls today versus leveling up your ability to make calls, getting in touch with the right people, spending time with a leader within your organization just because they sit next to you at lunch or something like that, and you pick up a few things. There's multiple levels all to this, and I don't know how productivity is measured. I guess in sales it is, numbers dialed, email sent, conversations had, which hopefully lead to deals being done as the end metric. I don't know how successful it is to measure things via these metrics, but more dials isn't always the best way to go about this, I don't think.
Yeah, I think we're missing, we need that human interaction. And I don't know if video can fill that gap. Like you and I talking would be great, but if we were in the same room, I bet you there'd be more explosions going on mentally in terms of, hey, what about this? What about this? Let's try that. And I think we're missing that element. And maybe that's what they're highlighting, that, I think we're missing something, because we're not being as creative. We're not thinking out of the box. We're not being as competitive because we're just not working together. And I think I've noticed that people tend to retreat to their computer, almost like, they love their inanimate object. They just want to talk to their computer or through it, as opposed to reaching out and picking up the phone and just really dialing in with somebody.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So the next topic, take us through this one, Victor, and this ties in with this idea of a collection of knowledge within an organization.
Well, I wanted to highlight this company because I was on a call. You have the Salesman podcast. I have the Sales Influence podcast. And I interviewed a gentleman over at Gong who I want to talk to because he's in the content management strategy, right? I go, what? Content management strategy. And I don't think we talk about that enough. Well, I wanted to find out more. So I'm picking his brain. I'm like, oh, my God, this is a great topic. And I think it's going to, by the way, again, we're ahead of the game. Well, this is going to be a major topic in the future. This will be a major topic. And what he was talking about, by the way, is Devin Reed over at Gong.io. And it was a great conversation. So we'll post it in about a week or two. But I was asking about, we were talking about managing content. Because I was like, well, what do you mean by managing content? He says, well, Victor, typically marketing develops content and we hope that salespeople will use it.
Yeah.
Right. And we all know what the rule is, right? The majority, 80% of it is never used. Salespeople wind up creating their own content. Marketing gets mad. Product management gets mad. Everybody gets mad because salespeople is not doing it. Then salespeople blame product management and marketing for not giving them the right tools and assets to actually sell. And so he says, what we're trying to do is figure out using AI algorithms to figure out what content really resonates by tying them. When somebody pulls content from the library and they tie that to a deal that was won, we have some correlation, not causation, but we have some correlation. So that was one aspect of using content. And in the future, you can imagine that the AI will be able to generate some content, right? Or at least highlight what content is needed. On the other side, on the marketing side, he was talking about how we're going to need different content. This is happening today. He says, what we're finding is that there are different pieces of content that the buyer needs to see on different parts of their journey towards reaching out or buying your product. So think about it. Different clients, different personas, ICPs, ideal client profiles, at different times of the actual buying cycle, looking at different pieces of content in order to close the deal. And I was like, okay, this is going to get fascinating because only an AI algorithm can figure this out. Like, how do we give the right content at the right time to the right person to ensure that the deal is closed? And then how does the system tell us what content needs to be developed? And so he mentioned a company called seismic.com. So I went on their website and looked at some of their stuff, and I'm like, okay, this is where content management is going. So I wanted to highlight that because we are at the forefront. Well, again.
So it's funny you talk about this, Victor. I have, and it was just going to cost too much money and be too much of a burden on mine and the team's time to co-promote with our own training. That's the focus of everything that we do, right? A content management platform that it's not on the size of size. I mean, it's more for small to medium enterprises versus the enterprise, the large enterprise. But I've literally got what I think is the future. I'll send it you, actually. I'll send you some of the plans so you check it out. I might even just post it publicly because we're not going to do it now. To create a minimum viable product, like a test version of this, it was just going to be too expensive, too time consuming. But there's massive opportunity here. And I pull back to and this the whole genesis of what that project was going to be of. In medical device sales, I went around with an iPad that I just created some simple slides that showed the endoscopes. In fact, I might actually have. Here we go. So anyone who's watching our video, this is, I think it might be a urethoscope. I can't remember anymore. This goes inside the patient, and you look down one end of it. And it would.
By the way, if you're listening to this, you need to come watch the video. It's much more entertaining.
So this is legit been used. How it remains in my hands. It was I bought it on eBay secondhand after I finished up my last sales role, and literally it's got a ton of little rod lenses in. It's absolutely fascinating what's inside these, and I've won probably £300,000-400,000 worth of new business with my iPad. I just did a cutaway with several images that were company images that I just chopped up and placed together to show the little rod lenses that go inside this thing. Now, the point of this was that these are about, say, I don't know how much they are now, but back then it was, say, like $3-4 a pop for each one of these. And what happens is the surgeon uses it dead carefully, and then they pass it to the nursing staff. The nursing staff puts it in a nice tray, dead carefully, and it goes down to be disinfected. And the person who's disinfecting it doesn't realize what it is, and they throw it in a metal tin and smash it to bits, which costs these hospitals tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds a year in repair bills. So I've won via just this stupid, tiny little bit of content that I went in and did some training on the back of with my iPad, just explaining again the rod lenses within this endoscope. And sharing that with the everyone within the kind of handling circle of these devices. Just that one little bit of education would save them tens of thousands a year, if not a month, on these different products. And I'd sold on then the back of it. That would get me a foot in the door, and that's how I would go about doing these deals. So I then went to the team and was like, hey, we all need iPads. We all need this little diagram that I put together. And, it's not rocket science. I'm not reinventing anything here. It's just something that I saw in the field that I thought would be good for everyone else. And of course, I got massive pushback. Nobody cared. There was no central database to store this content and information. And I was told to, here, take this user manual and hand this to people instead. Stop using these unauthorized images and this unauthorized content. So I know I've just gone on a bit of a tirade there, Victor. The point of that tale was that there's massive opportunity for, and I've not seen, I don't know Seismic. I've not looked at the CMS and the content management system for a long time, but there's massive opportunity for one person to be the sales force of managing this data within these organizations. And you're right, AI can come in and tie a lot of this up and make it actually useful, which I think a lot, as you said, the 80-20 of, it's probably 95-5 of content that gets produced versus actually gets used in the field.
Probably. Here's a visual. By the way, I've had your frustration before. Victor, you can't use it. That's not an authorized image. I'm like, but it's selling.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I still used it. Because salespeople will say, yeah, okay, I won't use it. Wink, wink. And then they go out in the field and they use it because they're responsible for a quota. They don't care what marketing says. But can I futurecast again? Just want to futurecast one more time in this context. Now, let's go back to your what is it, an endoscope?
Endoscope.
What is that thing you have there?
Yeah.
Right. And so let's say that now you're presenting via, in this case, we're doing it via Skype, Zoom, whatever it may be, right? And the AI is watching, right? It's measuring voice inflection, and then it's actually monitoring the conversation and the interaction. And then as you got to the part where you went on your pad and you started doing the digital board, right? You started writing. Mm-hmm. You would see enthusiasm spike. They would read the facial expressions, the micro gestures, and go, oh, this really piqued their interest.
Yep.
When he went into that demo, it piqued their interest. Look at their voice, look at the activity. And the AI will say, we need to do that. Because right here we see spikes in interactivity. Will was right. Will was right. I think that's the future right there.
Of course. And let me just future pace slightly further, Victor. Have you seen this Google demo? It's about a year old now. It exists if you've got an Android phone. I think a Nexus phone, whatever the brand of the Google specifically built ones were, where a AI robot basically phones up and calls a hairdresser and books an appointment. Have you seen that video?
Oh yeah, it's an amazing video.
Right.
I think the one I saw was I think it was a Chinese restaurant. They were trying to make reservations, and what was fascinating is that the AI, the voice, actually had like pauses, and hums. Okay. And the lady, this is not a disparaging remark, had an accent, which is quite heavy, and the AI was still able to understand it. So we had one person going, the machine, and the other person with a heavy accent, and they were able to make that reservation. That's amazing. That's where it's at.
It is. And in the hairdresser example, the AI goes, hey, 1 second, let me just pull out my diary. And it's, again, to make it more real, clearly that the AI can see the diary in an instant. So the reason I bring that up, Victor, is how far away are we from Gong just being able to sell our products via a slideshow without a human?
Oh, I think we're getting close. Yeah. I think the fact that they're so the reason Seismic came up is because you remember was it 2 weeks ago, we talked about Zoom and Gong doing a deal. But what I didn't know, and I found out yesterday, is that they also did a deal with Seismic. So now you got Seismic, content management, revenue intelligence platform, conversations, Gong. And then you got Zoom, the actual medium. This is getting close. And I suspect, this is my suspicion, that Gong is building itself as a powerhouse, obviously, because they want to be acquired.
Yep.
By a very large company.
Well,
and I'm putting all my money on Microsoft. That's my prediction. Yep. Microsoft will buy Gong.
I agree, because we covered it I covered it last week as you were kind of shielding from the storm, Victor. I had one of the product managers over at Salesforce reach out and send me a few behind the scene things, but then a public blog post that outlined that Salesforce have got all this as well. Now, when I compare feature for feature, it is slightly different to Gong, and perhaps I don't know if they'd like me saying this, but perhaps they're playing a little bit of catch up just with even the user interface and stuff like that. But regards, Salesforce have built it themselves. I feel like once they've committed to that, then they're not looking for, I don't know anything about this, but from a layperson, it seems like they're building it themselves. You wouldn't build it yourself if you're looking for an acquisition. So Microsoft seemed like the key brand to be chasing after a Gong, and then maybe a Zoom as well, even though they've got Microsoft Teams and just grabbing the whole market.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Microsoft would be wise just to buy Gong now before they get even more popular.
Yeah. That's
what I would do. At least, if not buy Gong outright, at least buy a good market stake, shareholder stake within Gong. And by the way, if Amit Bendov, the CEO from Gong, is listening to this, you should give us a commission, Will and I, for actually planting the ideas out in the field. So I'm just saying, throwing that out there, just in case he's listening.
Because we're going to have people calling us shills, Victor, like as if we've already been given commissions and we're just trying to lubricate the deal at this point.
Yeah. The thing is, I mean, for those listening to this week in sales, if you have a piece of technology you think it's worth us noting on this show, we're more than happy to look at the technology. But it's got to be good, man. It's got to be good to make the game here.
Yep.
Got to make the show. You got to be good.
Yep. And very literally, just to reiterate that point, drop me or Victor a LinkedIn message. Send us a link, a video. Even better, I had a couple of people offer, and I'll talk about this with you off of Victor. I had a couple of people offer demos that would not go to a customer. They would be more of what an investor or someone would see. Because me and Victor, I don't want to speak out of turn, mate, but I think you like all the sales technology. You find it just as interesting as what I do, right?
Oh, I think that's why we click on this show. And by the way, before I forget to mention, is that if you have a press release of some new acquisition, merger, new product, again, send us those press releases. And I don't know, they might make it on the show. So you're talking to two sales nerds right now. And we love this stuff.
For sure. Okay. So we're going to go from a serious topic to we're just going to ruin all credibility with the title of this one. A study shows 66% of sellers would rather clean, and then it says the bathroom rather than their own bathroom. So I don't know if this includes cleaning other people's bathroom, which makes it way worse. 66% of sellers would rather clean the bathroom than update their CRM system. Is that surprising to you, Victor, as a title? And this comes from a Forbes article.
It is not surprising. I mean, this has been around for quite a while. I mean, I think what they're trying to do now with different technologies to make it easier to put content in, but still, the human aspect of our conversation, sometimes we have to go in there and update, add notes. And it's just like, we as salespeople, we just want to run. Yeah. We hate stopping, to fill the tires, so to speak. And that's what this is.
And there's the article continues, or the research that the article is based on continues. 90% of sellers complain that parts of the job takes longer than it should. The top areas listed were entering notes in the CRM system. I think we've all been there at 35% of individuals. Updating or working in multiple systems, which what we're trying to encourage here with our own acquisition of Gong into Microsoft. We're part of the issue here, Victor, with that one. Mm-hmm. And sales training activities. The sales training actually, I thought was surprising. I have never really had good sales training experiences in the different corporate sales jobs I've been in, but I would never have said it was a bad use of my time. It might have been boring as shit, to use one of a better word, absolutely boring as heck. But I never thought this is a terrible use of my time.
But how much sales training are they getting that they would attribute 31%? I mean, what are you doing? Maybe they're training every day or something. Sure. Is that okay? So that's interesting. That number seems like really high. Do you know what I mean? I could see maybe product, getting to know new products, or maybe marketing, but training.
Well, I know some teams do and we don't. I don't know what market this is. It's B2B, but I don't know if it's more commodity based or enterprise or whatever what it is. But I know a lot of teams will do a kickoff every morning and a wrap up every afternoon. I've never been in a sales team that's done that, but I've seen it from afar, and I would personally, having again not experienced it, so maybe my mind could be changed, but I don't think that would be a particularly great use of my time.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to call Forbes on this one and say you need to vet your content a little more. I'm not. By the way, the first one, entering notes into the CRM system. My pushback to that would be, look, you can actually record. Like the dictation now is so easy. Why can't you just tuck your actual notes into the actual system, let it transcribe? So I'm going to call that one out too. Okay, I'm going to call that one out. Updating or working in multiple systems. Might have a point there.
Sure.
Sometimes they got legacy systems they haven't collapsed. We're actually, by the way, let's correct ourselves. We're actually advocating the consolidation of into a monolith, a mega system, right? A Microsoft mega system, like a Salesforce mega system or whatever other mega system there is. So yeah. And by the way, if companies like Chorus, what's another company? There's Chorus that does the voice intelligence, conversation intelligence, revenue intelligence platforms. Chorus would be another great company, by the way. Chorus is looking like it's moving up. So pushing Chorus too, I know.
Yeah, I think I've got the CEO of Chorus. I'll drop you an email if it's. I don't want to. I've said too much. I've got the CEO of the company coming on. If it's a good interview, I'm just going to say I'll drop you an email with his
what's
details,
his name?
Victor.
Is it Roy?
Yep.
Radani?
I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know. A lot of these interviews, just for the audience's sake, it's not me being ignorant, come from PR people. By the time you've been through 500 PR emails and pulled out the people that you actually want to interview, names tend to get lost until you actually speak with them.
Yeah, I think it's Roy Radani. I interviewed him for the AI and Sales podcast, and it was like it was a great conversation. A serious contender, man. Serious contender. Serious branding. Gong. Watch your backside.
I'm just Googling it. Jim Benton.
Jim Benton. No, that's not the guy I talked to.
We won't go.
Okay, we'll leave it at
Roy Renani is the president and co-founder. So we're on the right tracks.
Gotcha. Okay.
Good
and
man.
So, but there's some what's this other data point? They got some other data points here in this article. Well,
so the one that really stood out to me, Victor, was only 47% of sellers use their CRM regularly, and only 40% use it as is intended, I guess, by a sales engineer or the back-end CRM engineer working at these larger organizations. That blows my mind, right? Because
I'd buy those numbers.
Really?
I back Forbes on that one now. I'll say Forbes, I kind of believe you now. 47% of sellers use their CRM system regularly, and only 40% use it as intended. I think some people just use it to put the information in so management gets off their back. And then those who use it as intended, I'm almost sure that if we were to break that, what sellers are, and if we were to look at SDRs and BDRs, they're the people that are probably using it correctly. And the outside salespeople are probably the people complaining about entering data. That's how I would slice that pot. I could be totally wrong, and people can actually call in and tell me.
Well, I know when I was in outside sales selling these endoscopes, medical devices, camera systems, and we were encouraged to go and see the customer or the potential customer, then sit in the car, fill it all in. Otherwise, obviously, after you've driven to the next hospital, got to your next account, you've forgotten half the conversation that you've had. And that was a real pain and struggle for me because just logistically, it's just awkward working in your car. So, yeah, probably you're accurate there, Victor, of the outside salespeople are just trying to dump it in, or they'll come back to it later on. Or I even remember I used to have a little notepad and I used to jot out notes and then try and fill it in at the end of the day. And then I used to get pushback from sales leadership, sales management for doing that because, rightly so, you're forgetting half the stuff that you're writing down.
And then the information gets distorted the longer it takes to put it in, and you lose a lot. But when I was talking to Roy over at Chorus.ai, I think he was the one that he shocked me when he told me this. I'm almost sure he was the guy. He said only 5% of the conversations that outside salespeople have with their clients actually make it into the CRM. And that's why Chorus, Gong, and others exist, because they're trying to get those conversations in there. So fascinating. Fascinating.
Okay, so with regarding to recording calls, you've got a note in here from riverside.fm. Tell us about that, Victor.
Well, I wanted to give you an update. This was really for your ears and eyes only. But, by the way, I wanted to talk about it on the show, but really just have a conversation, because I've been using riverside.fm, and riverside.fm is like almost like Zencaster would be its direct competitor. And it's a conferencing tool, right? Recording conferences, interviews. And the good thing, what they do is that they upload the video and the audio on each side into a cloud, and you can download it, right? So you'll reduce the noise, if you have a bad internet connection. So I want to report that I like the product. The GUI is easy to use, so I would recommend it. So if you're going to record interviews, I think it's great. Also, they can do live call-ins. Really easy. Somebody can video call in, jump right in there, and do the call. Perfect. Downside is when we do international, like you and I.
Sure.
I notice it just can't handle it. And I don't think it's the software. I think it's just a connection. And I think the sensitivity to those connections really impacted. So if you're looking for, I guess that's why I put it under the technology section. If you're looking to record interviews and have live call-ins, which I doubt most companies want to do, but Maybe they'll have a guest CEO come in and want to just talk about something. This is a great software to use. Riverside.f. I endorse them 100%.
I'll check it out. I saw the Zencaster equivalent for video. This is, isn't it? And I like the idea of recording it locally. If there's any issues in, stutters with regards to the connection, that is something that I use Skype for all these recordings. We're recording on Skype right now to remove remove the fourth wall. Is that correct?
Yes.
To remove,
I think it's the third wall. I thought it was the third wall.
Well, we're beyond the third wall now, Victor.
Whatever. We're going to start. Okay, we're now inventing the fifth wall. Okay,
we're enlightening the seventh dimension here of sales communication with the audience, and I use Skype. I just find it's really, I think it's just really robust, and there's a reason why these systems are not very ubiquitous. There's not a million video conferencing systems. It's because the prediction algorithms, I guess it's some form of AI, to keep frame by frame data. Trying to do this podcast 5-6 years ago with Skype is a completely different experience, even though the program looks exactly the same than what it is now. And more power to any of these organizations that can get going. It's the same with video hosting. The only companies that host videos are the tech giants that own massive data centers. Because if you want to start a competitor, the only place you can host your video is within AWS of Amazon or over at Google servers. And so they're never going to give you an opportunity to compete. And I think it's the same with some of the technology that's used in these video communication platforms.
Yeah, they're evolving. Like I said, I think it's a great tool, and I don't know, we'll see where it goes. But my disappointment, and this is for the people at Zoom, listen carefully. I said, I like you. You're easy to use. Everybody knows how to use you. You're like the go-to standard. I get that. But please, can you do something about the resolution when you record an actual video call? The resolution is I think sometimes I got as low as 390 or 360. I forgot what the resolution is. I feel like I'm back in 1980s watching something, and it's garbage. You can't use it. I don't know why Zoom cannot up their game on their infrastructure and provide high quality video. Dear Zoom, please let us know here at This Week in Sales why you can't do that.
Well, let me take a guess. It's probably that they're just so overrun because Zoom became the Skype of the moment. I know how to describe it. We talk about I'm going to hoover the floor, and Hoover's a brand. I feel like Zoom is now, I'll just Zoom you later on, as opposed to we'll do a video chat. So I think just it became such a part of the zeitgeist over the past 6 to 12 months that they're probably 10x the amount of traffic on their servers. And there's probably a bunch of really unfortunate engineers who are sat just mopping the sweat from the forehead right now listening to this, Victor, who are trying to just keep on top of all of this.
There's two things that impress me with what you just said. One is that you've taken an empathetic role with a company not delivering great service. That's amazing for you because you're usually criticizing, right? So the other thing is that you managed to slide in the word zeitgeist.
Nice.
In that conversation. Very nicely done.
And if you asked me to define the word zeitgeist, I don't think I'd be able to.
It's the spirit, right? It's like the spirit of. The spirit of.
The problem is, I also
look up zeitgeist. I go zeitgeist. I think it's the spirit. In the spirit of. Okay.
Problem is, Victor, I talk a lot of nonsense, and I'm also a terrible salesperson. So, zeitgeist, noun, the defining spirit or mood of a particular period of history, shown by the ideas and belief of the time. Very well done, sir. Very well done, sir. I would have never been able to pull that out.
I got the spirit part right. I didn't get it within a particular time. But see, we're much more than a sales show. We're a lexicon show also.
There's going to be we're going to have philosophy corner next week, and we're going to get into I don't even know any philosophers to throw in there.
Why do we sell?
Okay, next up. Now, I wanted to hide this from you and ask you the question, but I put it in the docs. You've probably already seen it. This is a report from chiefexecutive.net. I was going to ask you the question, Victor. The missing sales metric that mean CEOs' successes or failures. What is that metric, Victor?
So what is the missing sales metric?
What is the missing sales metric?
Well, if I look at it, I looked at the note right now. So dang it. I wrote a book around this that I still have not released.
Oh, wow. What's the book titled? Or is this something that's coming, or is this something that's been sidelined just before I dive into
Can I
it in
say
too
this?
much detail.
This is like no joke. This is like no joke. I finished the book. It had 2 titles, but I settled on Mastering the Upsell. And it's like almost 200 pages. I've had this done since March, fully edited. I just need to hit the launch button.
Wow.
And I have not published that book. This may be the catalyst that motivates me to actually launch the book. In there, I describe, I think, why upselling is important, why it reduces the acquisition cost.
Yeah.
I show studies that, just on upselling itself, you can increase your sales up to like 30% just on upselling and cross-selling. And then I give 16 different strategies that you can use to upsell products, and then the pushbacks and so forth and so on. So I might have to just, boom, release the book now.
It sounds like we planned this to pitch the book, but yeah.
It does. It does. I'm like, I just literally looked at it. I just said, oh, upselling, is that it? I never would have guessed that. I never would have guessed that. All right. Well, that's it. I'm launching the book.
You should do. We'll tie it in. I'll when the book comes out, I'll link it in the show note to this episode as well, and we'll get it in the video descriptions to drive some traffic to it there. Good. Right. So this report, and tell us if this aligns with what your book's about, Victor. But chiefexecutive.net, they share that new logos are going to be more difficult to land as many companies pull back from trying new services while they try to survive a tougher business environment. According to Gartner, only 28% of sales leaders say they're meeting their cross-selling and upselling growth targets. So people know that they should be doing it because they can answer a quiz and a poll that they're not doing enough of it. But seemingly the gap is your book of them not knowing how to do it, perhaps.
That plus what I've discovered in my research is that if you don't make upselling part of your sales process, it doesn't happen. That was the big aha as I was doing research for the book. And because I asked people, where's your upselling, step? They're like, what? You mean the follow-up? I said, no, the upselling piece. Like, where do you begin to upsell? Like, upsell isn't after you sell the product. Upsell is you plant it during the discovery, the presentation all the way through. And I asked people, is that in there? And the majority say, no, it's not. It's an afterthought. Oh, by the way, since you're buying that, would you also like to buy this? Customers like, no, it's too shocking. So that's great data, by the way. I'm telling you, I think you've motivated me just to kind of launch this thing.
Good.
The zeitgeist. I can't use the word zeitgeist. I was going to try to use zeitgeist again. Sorry, I blew that one.
Well, I expect some accreditation within the front cover, Victor. I'll be disappointed otherwise.
Yeah, I'll make the adjustments and the acknowledgements, man, just for you, Will.
Well, I wanted to bring this one up because it's something that I'm focused on internally with our training now. We're getting asked more and more about, I've never really done this before. I've done it for a few organizations, but people are joining the training and then they're asking for consulting and other things on the back of it. So that's what motivated me to look at this, kind of the principles and the ideas of upselling and look at some of the data points on this. And as I said, when Gartner come out with a fact or come out with data saying that 28% of sales leaders say that they're not meeting their own targets, there's got to be an opportunity there, hasn't there?
Oh, it's a huge opportunity. I mean, think of, first of all, you don't have to go talk to somebody new. They already bought from you.
Yep.
That's one. Two, your acquisition costs are almost nil because you already have them. You're holding on longer term, so the customer lifetime value, cycle could be extended. That means they're worth more over time. And again, the upselling piece is just mentioning something you have and you have the way in. So I would focus. I always say there's only 4 strategies in this market. That's it. In selling, there's only 4 strategies. Go out and gain new clients, retain your existing clients, upsell. That's the growth strategy. And the fourth one would be reactivate people who haven't bought.
Yep.
And go back and get some of those. And so, but the upselling is the big piece that's always missing. So, good point.
And I guess
upselling,
I guess upselling is also part of that reactivation process, right? If you have someone who's just been plodding along and the usage of your product has slowed, the same ability, perhaps, tell me if I'm wrong, but some of the same strategies of upselling what could rejuvenate that account and that contract as well.
Oh, absolutely. Great point that you highlight that, because that's really more like it could be a sales function, but it could also be a marketing function.
Sure.
Like marketing can reach out and say, look, we realize you haven't bought in the last 6 to 12 months. We know you have this. Here's what we're doing. You know what I mean? So marketing can play a major role in the upsell and cross-sell. Marketing and sales for those growth strategies and reactivation strategy, perfect 1-2 punch. Look at this. We're helping companies for free here, Will. I mean, it's a shame.
Well, the thing is, I don't know if we could charge for this content, Victor. I think that's
I think we can, man. We're gonna have to set up a Patreon account or something.
Something.
Say, hey, just drop us some big money in there, man. So anyway, but hey, Will, can I talk about relationships?
You can talk about our relationship, Victor.
Okay. So did you know that building relationships on a sales calls is important? So in this article, okay, I threw this in here because I just sometimes when I read something, I go, I get it. It's obvious, but sometimes we have to state the obvious. And so I wanted to put this under, sales training because I want people to remember this. And I'll explain why this was really front and center with me. Building a relationship with someone you can't see can be difficult, but simply changing the way you talk can make a big impact. Here are 6 tips for using on the phone or a video, I assume, also to your advantage in making connections. Match volume, blend voice volume, really saying the same thing. Match talking speed, the rhythm, cadences, the energy, and vocal variety. All these are important. The one that I always like to highlight is the speed and the energy. Because sometimes you wanted somebody, sometimes a salesperson comes up too heavy or too much energy. It's like, well, pull it down. I'm a type A. But the reason I wanted to highlight this is because as I was talking to Devin, and I hate to use Gong IO again, but it was just fascinating conversation. We talked about training. And one of the things he talked about how is that they listen to their talk tracks for their phone calls. And they're first asked, how do you think that call went? And a lot of people say, oh, killed it. I know I nailed that call. And then they have meetings, I think, once a week to review some of these talk tracks, the actual audio. So people sit in a room and everybody listens to each other. And it was interesting how he was talking about how listening to your voice, you're like, oh, I blew that one. But then, when somebody else puts their talk track in and everybody's listening to it, you begin to understand because you hear the right cadences, you hear the right inflections, you hear the right tones. And I just want to highlight that this is a skill set. Much like upselling is an undervalued skill or sales process, this is an undervalued skill, in my opinion, video or phone. That's why I wanted to talk about that.
And it makes total sense. How much value do you put into things like, because I don't know where I stand on some of this either, the skill sets of being able to lead a conversation or set up your frame I'm going to use weird terms here that sound outdated in 80s and 90s sales training-esque, but we'll be able to discuss on the back of them. So basically being like the alpha in the conversation, leading it and pushing people to fall in line with your cadence and speaking and the speed of things rather than you matching theirs. How much if you were to do training and that question was brought up, Victor, how much would you put on that as a valuable part of the skill set, as opposed to what we're talking about here is being polite and building rapport, isn't it?
Right. I mean, the emphasis I would put on, if it was a full day of sales training, I'd probably give it a full hour just on this. That's what I would do because I think it's that important to get because the thing is you can read a script. But we all been on that phone when a person sounds, you could tell they're reading the script well. And it takes you to kind of memorize this and then say it the way you would say it. And putting a pause here, inflection there makes all the difference in the world. So I think this is a skill set that's not going to go away. Even as much as we bring on machine learning and we go towards the science, that 80-20, that 20% is still going to be some of this, that I feel comfortable. Your voice is very soothing to me. Yeah. Now, you could argue, because we're future casting again, that the AI one day, based on that Google experiment you saw, will be able to do all this naturally.
Well, imagine if Skype, Zoom, whoever, pitch corrected your voice and did some of this for you. You speak your words. Like I know Google earbuds have this, I guess it's connected to the phone, but you're able to speak English into your earbuds and then someone can hear Chinese in theirs. It does real-time translation. What if all of this can be done automated for you? And because and the context of this, everyone listening to this and watching this, clearly Victor is a professional public speaker with decades of experience. When you listen to his voice, the tonality, it goes up, it goes down, there's excitement, there's pauses, there's stops and starts. When you listen to me, I sound just like the random fella off the street you'd selling your pork pies or sausage rolls in a shop.
No, you don't.
No, it is, and it's something that I'm trying to improve. It's something I'm working on. So I'm going to ask you in a second any resources or anything you'd recommend to improve it for myself. But what happens if AI can do all of this for you? Like we have auto tune for rappers to sound weird on rap tracks. Can we not do this automatically? Someone speaks into a phone, camera, microphone, and AI does this work for us.
Oh, by the way, changing their octaves, intonation, I think it all exists. It's the accuracy that people worry about. You know what I mean? And those human interactions, how accurate can the machine algorithm be? So we're not talking, can it be done? It can be done. It's how accurate is the machine and how consistent is it that we are comfortable letting the machine handle it. But yeah, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I mean, even that's going to be AI'd away.
I think we're just doing ourselves out of a job here, Victor, of all this. So let me ask you this, because I think this could be useful for the audience. Because again, because I listen back to these shows, there is a massive difference between the way that you speak. It's far more interesting. It's clear that you've trained this and you've worked on it and practiced it. And it's clear that I'm a fella from the north of England who hasn't done much work on this, who's doing a podcast for 5 years, who should have done some work on this in the past. What would you recommend to someone who wants to improve the ability to, I guess it's public speaking, right? The ability to speak and tell stories and be more interesting via the vocal tonality and pacing and things like that?
I think the obvious one is listen to yourself. You just listen to yourself. The other thing that I realized years ago is that I think I have to say something, and I have to say it at a certain speed so people get it, and I feel like I need to get it out.
Yep.
It sounds like that, right? And I've learned that what happens is like drinking from a fire hose. You're not giving the other person a chance to absorb. So if you become very empathetic, which I know you are, because you empathize with those people at Zoom. If you empathize with people, you go, you know what? Let me break this down into chunks so that you can understand exactly what I'm saying. So let me walk you through it. And then when I go to go fast, I want to generate that excitement. I'll do this, ABC, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's do that. But you know what I mean? And just practice that. I don't know how to also explain it, but you don't have to spew it all out because you think it makes more sense. Sometimes it's giving people the pauses to give the other person a chance to go, okay, got it. Okay, got it. And be comfortable with that pause, just like you did. When you did a little experiment, you were saying what I do, when you were mimicking me, you sounded like me.
Sure.
Because you were adding the pauses. That's all it is.
That makes no sense. Well, I will, because I do just throw a load of stuff out there. Now, for the rest of the show, Victor, I'm going to be a bit more intentional about now I feel like I'm holding back, and I feel like the show's going to take 4 hours to finish if I carry on like this.
Yeah, don't go that slow. Hey, Will, I want to jump to the book review so we can wrap this up.
Okay.
Fine. Look, I rarely get excited about a book. There's a lot of good books out there, but I'm reading this book. I don't even know who this guy is. I think it's Dave. How would you pronounce that last name? David. I wanted to say Primer. It's Priemer.
It looks like Premier spelled wrong.
Premier. I know, like Premier spelled wrong, right? And so David, Premier, Primer, whoever you are, doesn't matter. All you got to do is remember, this book came out in April. It's titled Sell the Way You Buy, a modern approach to sales that actually works, even on you. And I'm reading this book, and I think it's one of the best books I've read in terms of a compilation of neuroscience, influence, persuasion with real life tactics that you can actually use via video or via phone. No cheesy tactics, great scripts in there, examples. I love when people tell you, here's what you need to do. Now, let me show you a few how to do it and walk you through it. And then he kept tying it back to the science. And then he kept bringing it forward to the actual application. So he had this beautiful balance of sales and art, or I should say science and art, that I'm going to highly recommend this book. It's called Sell the Way You Buy by David Primer or Premier. Check it out.
Good stuff. Well, I'll link to that book in the show notes to this episode, which will include below these videos that go on YouTube and everywhere else as well. And with that, Victor, I'll share my key takeaway of the week, and then you can wrap up the show with yours. Mine is very simple. Going back to the very top of the show, if you're not negotiating your 2021 contract, you're not negotiating your sales targets, you should be negotiating them. They are things that can change. They can go up and down. They're not just something that's given to you. Even if your sales manager claims that they are, they've been given to him, and he's probably, or he or she has negotiated on their behalf as well. So if they're not willing to negotiate, perhaps take a look at some of the things that we talked about at the top of the show, in the show notes, some of the documents there, some of the resources, and that'll give you some ammunition to arm yourself to go back and fight for. It doesn't have to be a lower number, but an appropriate number.
That's a great point. And like I said, start negotiating early. We always did that. Like we started to negotiate like in the third quarter, even before the end of the third quarter. We were already negotiating. We're setting anchors. I don't know if this, they're going to have the budget next year. I don't know if we can really hit this number. But and then we had, I don't know how you did it. We had to go in there and face a committee of people from the company, everybody represented, right? Yeah. You got manufacturing, product management, and then you have to give your pitch. And then they would have that discussion where they go, wait a second, Victor. All the whispers going on at the table. And they're like, bam, here's your number. You're like, no. So some people would walk out of there with big smiles. Some people would walk out there very depressed. It was really interesting to do that. My big takeaway from the week was the conversation with Debit about how we're using conversation and content. That was the big one for me because I never really thought about how we're going to use content, how we're going to manage the content. And as the buyers go along in their journey, how do you use that content to pull people in? Tie that in with Gartner's data point about, 80% of buyers are now going to go through digital channels. And it's in my head, I'm going, where is this going, Will? We're seeing the digital transformation of the sales profession. And I'm still trying to figure out what does that look like in the future? And that was my takeaway. He gave me more, I guess he just threw more fuel on my mental fire to go, where is this going? So I'm excited, but also there's some anxiety because you're trying to figure it out. How is this thing going to roll out?
Amazing stuff. Well, I'll probably quiz you on that next week to see if some of the pieces have come together and you've got any new insights on this, because it's clear content is becoming more important and salespeople trying to blag things on the phone is becoming less important over time. Do you think that's fair to say?
I think it is.
Good stuff. Well, we're in agreement, as always, as we project the future. We'll project enough, Victor, right, and some of it will be right.
And by the way, we should let large corporations know, enterprise corporations know that if you really want to understand where the market's going, the future of selling, you should watch This Week in Sales.
With that, my name is Will Barron. That is Victor Antonio, and we'll join you again next week in sales.